Hey everyone, Ripley Sellers with aBlogtoWatch. Today we're taking a look at an interesting pair of G-Shocks. This is a collaboration that Casio did with the famous artist Joshua Vides for 2026. Now, what you're getting is a white DW5600 and a black DW6900, but the two watches have been given an aesthetic overhaul to make them in Joshua Vides' signature artistic style. Now, before we get into the watches themselves, it's worth going over who Joshua Vides is and kind of why these watches are important and why this is a collaboration we're talking about right now. Now, some people might not have heard of Joshua Vides or known his art or even heard his name, but you've probably been familiar with the style that he's pioneered. He first rose to prominence in 2017, and the reason why he first came on my radar was that he had taken a pair of white Nikes and took either a black paint or a black marker and made them look like a cartoon. I like shoes. Caught my eye, and clearly that goes for a lot of other people because that was sort of the catalyst that made him blow up in a big manner and put him on the radar of all of these massive companies that he has subsequently collaborated with, such as Fendi, Nike, Under Armour, BMW, the LA Dodgers, the NBA, giant franchises, huge companies. So part of the reason why we recognize this style, and it's almost become democratized and we recognize it as part of just the general culture and something that we see from many different brands and in many different mediums, is thanks to Joshua Vides and these huge high-profile collaborations he did. Similar to like Bauhaus, where it's almost something we don't really associate with an artist, but more of design codes and a language and a mindset for how art or product design is executed. You could almost say a similar statement about this. It can be used for a lot of different types of physical products. You're now seeing it from other individuals, but Joshua Vides is sort of the grandfather of it all. And the concept that he calls it is reality to idea, where it's basically the gist of it is that most physical objects in our lives, whether it's a building or clothing or a watch or literally anything, probably started its design life out as a sketch. Maybe it was thrown into CAD thereafter and, turned into something that could be milled and 3D modeled. But a lot of times product designs, ideas, buildings sort of just start as a loose sketch. And so what Joshua Vides does with his reality to idea concept is to sort of flip that on its head and make it go in the other way. So there's a real product, a physical product, and it's then covered in usually a monochromatic assortment of sketch style lines to make it look like it is a two-dimensional sketch. Now, the scale that he works on can vary, so sometimes for the apparel brands, it might be an item of clothing, or in this case, a watch. But when you get to the artistic side, you're getting full cars or giant interior spaces of a building that have been overhauled in this manner. And it really creates sort of a trippy effect when you see the reality alongside you, like a car or the walls of a building, but it's been done in this style that makes it feel two-dimensional and also just like a not real object, yet it's something you can touch and interact with. So it's cool, it's easily to digest, and like many things, the concept is simple, but the execution or how it's applied to achieve a different effect is sort of herein lies the art. Now, since 2017, it's been growing in prominence as a style, and we've seen other watch brands sort of be inspired by it in their own pieces. Now, none of those were done with Joshua Vides. That was basically one watch brand or another thinking it was a cool style and wanting to incorporate it into their own works. This collaboration with G-Shock are the first watches that Joshua Vides has actually done himself, the first official co-branded ones. So all of the other sketch style watches from various brands that have been released over the last several years, nothing to do with Joshua Vides, but they have been more or less inspired by the style that he is largely credited with popularizing. Now, even Casio has made other sketch style watches like the Manga ones or like the origami paper ones, but this is the first one with Joshua Vides, and if you look at it, the lines and how he does it, it's a bit different than the Manga style, the folding paper style, or what you'll see on other brands throughout the industry like D1 Milano. What's also interesting is that both of these watches are digital, so arguably there's less details to play with on them because the screen is what it is, and so any of the sketch style lines have to be on the rest of it. But I think both of these are really interesting and successful for different reasons. It's almost like two sides of the same concept. If you look at the white one, which is glossy with black lines over it, the black lines serve as like the outline points and shading. And there's quite a lot of them. There's quite a lot of lines on there. Whereas if you looked at the black 6900, those white lines that have been applied to it, they're much more sparse and they're more highlighting the highlights on the watch rather than the shaded sections. So it's not like one is just the different model in a different color, it's sort of exploring two different ways that this sketch style can be implemented to achieve a similar effect. What's also a nice detail about these watches, if you look at the mineral glass screen cover and the area around the screen, which would normally have traditional text relating to, the Casio branding or the functions of the buttons or whatever, all of this has been redone in sort of a sketch kind of handwritten style, and I think that's a really nice touch. Beyond that, though, the watches themselves are very, very similar, near identical from a functional standpoint to standard entry-level 5600 and 6900. So what that means is full resin case, mineral glass crystal, stainless steel screw-on case back, no solar, no Bluetooth, nothing, no atomic timekeeping or anything like that. Basic set of features, but of course you do get stuff like a stopwatch, alarm, auto calendar, and a backlight. Now the backlight's one area where I guess functionality is slightly different. If you press the backlight, rather than just lighting up the screen, the whole screen lights up white, but what you get in the background is a blue traffic cone emblem, which is Joshua Vides' sort of signature logo, if you will. And this is true on both of the models. Beyond that, they're going to function the exact same, and that's one of the things I like about these. It's a G-Shock. If you've used them before in the past, these are going to function the exact same, so there's no learning curve whatsoever. And it is a G-Shock, so it's inherently a relatively affordable watch, at least the entry-level ones are. Now, these cost almost twice as much as their standard entry-level bottom dollar counterparts. The basement level versions of these watches start out at right about $100. These are closer to $200, but what you're getting beyond just a really interesting visual presentation, also some nicer packaging. Each one comes in this elongated cardboard box rather than the usual little G-Shock tin. The white one comes in a white box, the black one comes in a black box. Now, you can't wear the box. None of this means anything if you're just looking forward to wearing the watch, but because this is a co-branded piece done with a famous artist, there's going to be some people who are buying it as a collector's item or as a display piece maybe or something for their office or home. And so the fact that the packaging is also made a little bit special is just kind of a nice touch. And the fact that each one matches the watch is even better. Now, on the wrist, I really like these. Between the two, the standout in my opinion is the white one, and that's just a personal preference. When I think of Joshua Vides' work the most, it's usually white with black lines, so I feel like it's just a little bit more emblematic, and also just the way that the lineage is done on it feels a little bit more dynamic and interesting. So that's my preference between the two, but usually when it comes to G-Shocks themselves, I like the 6900 because it has a dedicated button for the light right there on the front, and it's, at least for me growing up in the 90s, it was the one that I would see most frequently all the way into the 2000s. It looks so different than other Casio watches of the time. It's like that sideways D shape versus the DW5600, which is a bulky rectangle and kind of looks almost like a F91W on steroids. Now, people's preferences are going to go either way, but what I like is that you could own both of these and not feel like you have the exact same watch. Aside from them being different models, the different treatments and the way that the lines are done on them makes them feel definitively different. And since each one, it costs less than $200, you could buy both for less than the price of like, a Seiko or something like that. Now, part of me wishes that these two models were solar powered, as that's one of my favorite features that Casio does. No one needs to worry about battery replacements, super convenient, but it probably wasn't possible on these two watches, and here's why. Normally on these two models, where Casio hides the solar panels are in the area under the crystal that surrounds the LCD screen. However, on these watches, that area is occupied by paint to give them that sketch style appearance, and since this is one of my favorite features, I don't think you could have done this in a truly transparent manner while still maintaining the appearance and letting light get through it. So I'm going to go ahead and give them a pass in this particular instance. Every handful of years or whatever, you can have to pop a new battery in it, but you don't need to worry about it getting light or anything like that. Now, we have a full hands-on review live on aBlogtoWatch.com right now, so go ahead and check that out if you're looking for a more in-depth look or some additional hands-on photos. And don't forget to like and follow. Make sure you subscribe so you can stay up to date on all our latest content. I'm Ripley. Again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.